Testing, testing, testing. Blah, 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 blah.
Ready, set, go.
It's time for the Coach Amy and Coach Liz show.
A podcast for endurance athletes by two athletes, two coaches, and a physical therapist.
We are your hosts, Coach Amy
And Coach Liz.
coming to you from Kansas City. And we're back with another episode. So when I was traveling back, and it was, I don't listen to podcasts.
I know, which is I just think so weird. I don't know how you're doing a podcast without being a listener.
I'm not. I'm a talker and a reader, not a listener.
But if you listen to podcasts, what topic would you listen to?
I would listen to something that's funny and distracting.
Okay,
for
like
me.
SmartList.
Like SmartList.
Okay.
Okay. So, what's the SmartList? So our listeners know what SmartList is.
Surely
it's like
people know what
comedians.
SmartList. It's Jason Bateman, Will Arnett. They just interview people. It's light. It's fun.
It's fun. Okay. So, anyway, I was didn't have access to my reading material, and I was waiting for my plane. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to listen to SmartList, and I didn't realize what the topic was, but they were interviewing John Bon Jovi, who has like a special coming out and everything. And I was surprised to hear that he had a vocal cord injury and had surgery for this injury. And it's taken 2 years for him to recover and go through rehabilitation. He's not quite done yet. But he said something that I thought was so, it's just all our listeners and all our endurance athletes who have had one injury or another could relate to. And he said, I got to get the ghosts out of the machine, the ones in your head. Your mind still has to remind your body that you are fixed. Mm-hmm. And this is such a thing in any kind of rehabilitation from injury or surgery that I find, but especially athletes. You go out there and you're like, you're worried, you're concerned. You start back to your run and you're like, oh, I can feel this niggle. Is it really there? Mm-hmm. Is it in my head? Mm-hmm. It's that concern and worry, and it can manifest itself into kind of still being there. But it's a whole psychology thing that goes on in your head. Mm-hmm. And I love that. You got to get the ghosts out of the machine. I love that. And really, no, you are fixed. It's okay. Mm-hmm. You're going to come at this conservatively. You're going to get back. Mm-hmm. So you have something to talk about in terms of like the mind and sports.
Oh, my favorite.
I know.
I mean, and that's true coming back from injury, but it's true just in like, in everyday life. And then, certainly in like just participating in sports, like we all have things that, the way that we talk to ourselves, matters so much. And in this class I took on the nervous system, it was really interesting because it talked about how your body doesn't know if it's someone else that's yelling at you or if it's yourself that's yelling at you. And the reason that it matters, like the thoughts going through your head, is because your nervous system is going to react to that the same, whether it's you talking to yourself, like self-talk, or someone else yelling at you, which is like
interesting.
It's fascinating. And so, that is, and because I could, people talk about self-talk and like, I just couldn't like really get myself behind it. I'm like, I don't understand. It seemed cheesy. I don't understand why it matters. Well, it is, like people are like, just all the things that kind of made me want to just run far, far away about like being loving to yourself, which is terrible because that is my struggle, right? I really have a hard time with how I talk to myself.
We're very hard on ourselves.
We're very hard on ourselves. And I just really appreciated understanding kind of the science behind why that matters so much. Mm-hmm. And it really it changes how your body responds to what you're doing because, you would never say the things that we say to ourselves that you would say. You would never say to a friend, else. Right?
Yes.
And it matters because your body's responding in the same way. And it doesn't matter if it's like you're yelling at yourself because you got the carrots wrong, or if it's you're yelling at yourself because you think you suck at running or you suck at swimming, right? And it really affects the way that we physically perform and how we feel about what we're doing. And the sports psychology, it's becoming, I think more and more talked about. And as a coach, I remember reading over and over again, the thing that separates, like when you've got people that are like at the top and they're all so good and they're all really physically the same, what separates them out is the psychology, is their ability to manage their head. And it took me a really long time to understand like why that's the case. And also just to be like, well, that's true for all of us. It doesn't matter what, where you are, whether you are just getting into the sport or you're at the top level, managing your head is so important. And while that conversation is becoming more discussed, I don't think that having access to a sports psychologist is something. One, there's not like, they're not a dime a dozen. Yeah. Like and there's always the idea you need somebody who's actually good. People can get trained and not have a shitwit idea of what they're doing. Pardon my French. That's in any profession.
Yes.
But it's not just because it's available doesn't mean it's accessible, right?
Right.
And I think it's so important for a lot of reasons. Anyway, a couple years ago with my athletes, we did a book club around the book called The Brave Athlete, which is a really good, I feel like it has a lot of good tools for athletes in it. We got a lot out of it, but I've wanted to do more. And in the past couple years, kind of on my own health healing journey, I've become introduced to a type of therapy that's called internal family systems. It's called IFS. It's fascinating, and it's really exploded in probably the past 5 years in the mental health world. And although it's called internal family systems, and I got hung up on that when I was learning about it, and I kept thinking it was like talking about like my family, my family of origin, right? So just forget that and think for a minute about the voices in our heads that we have, and like the different, the way that it's kind of becomes like this running narrative that we have in our head. We may not even realize a lot of the time like what the voices are telling us in our head, but if you stop and think about it, you may have a voice that's like always, that's telling you that you're doing a great job at cutting the carrots, and then you may have that same voice that's telling you you're doing a terrible job at cutting the carrots and you are a piece of shit human being, or that you really are you have no business being an athlete out on a course, or you're going to panic in open water, or that you are X, Y, or Z. They're the voices in your head, and that is really, it's like your internal family, right? It's like the system of like they take this type of therapy takes these voices, and it gives them, we name them, and we talk about like what their job is, because all of those ideas that we have in our head are trying to serve a purpose, right? They come from someplace, and they are serving a purpose to try to keep us safe, or to try to like, their intentions are good. All of these things that we tell ourselves, their intentions are good, although the consequences of what they're telling us are not always good. But this type of therapy names, like, specifies what those voices are, what they're telling us, what their purpose is, so that we can learn to work with them.
Okay, so here's an example of something that I've worked on, and I want you to tell me what the name of this voice is.
Yeah.
Okay, because would it be like a family member, but not a family, not true? What would the?
Well, it's like your inside
one of my inner
inside
voices.
Committee.
Yeah. Okay, so one of my inner committee members.
Yeah.
It sits there and says, well, after I've said something or done something, it might be a social, it might be at work or whatever, but it's like, or even a past event in my life where it's like, that's shameful. Oh,
yeah.
You didn't do, you could have said that better. You could have done that better. Or, how embarrassing was that, that how you behaved or whatever. And then I have finally shut that committee out.
Yes.
That member, I'm like, no, that is in the past.
Yes.
I am working on that.
And so you have to address those, and there's different ways to do that.
Yeah.
But like, so one of the things about internal family systems is that like those inside committee members serve a role. And so there's managers that are trying to help you manage your life. There are protectors, and they're doing things to help protect you. There are committee members called firefighters that are doing things to like help stop the pain that you're feeling. And a lot of that will come from like something that was probably said to us when we were very, very young that we don't remember. But a lot of it drives from like, from an evolutionary perspective, we have the need to belong into society, and it's because it was not safe for us when we were cave people to be like outside of the group. A lot of our drivers as human beings are not to be like isolated or outside the group, and so those voices can come because if you're doing something that's shameful or that you could have done better, the risk there is that you are not going to be accepted by the group. And so there's that very strong like need to be in that group. And so there's a lot of very harsh things we say to ourselves that, can stem back from that idea of belonging, but that really comes from like really are like how we grew up and what something that somebody may have said to us that maybe wasn't even intentionally mean, right? It's like you're born this clean slate, and you know, a comment that one person makes to another person can land on somebody in 1,000 different ways for no reason for it may have been a very mean thing that the person said, or maybe it wasn't something mean, but the way it landed on us as people just it landed on us in a way that made us think that like we had done something wrong, and so we internalize that shame, and it becomes that voice, and it's that running narrative in our head that is, it's brutal, right? Yeah. And so it's what you just said there, where you take that voice and you give it a name and you look at it and you start to work with it almost like it's another person, right? And so you're trying to understand, like, are you trying to protect me from something? Are you trying to help me manage my life so that so and then the thing is that those thoughts then create behavior patterns that we act on. So like if you take that back to sports psychology and somebody is like, has this running narrative in their head and they're like, I suck at running and I'm a piece of shit for being on this course and I don't even belong here, and they start going down this wormhole, and then they wonder why they can't run when they get into a race, right?
Yeah.
And so it's these thoughts that are coming from various places, and maybe their intentions are good. They're trying to protect you from something, but the problem is that those
like
thoughts,
you're crazy for wanting to do this.
Well, right? I mean,
yeah.
So and so but their intentions might be good, but then it ends up that you can't work through that, and so you either don't want to race anymore, or you stop trying to do stuff. You walk on the run when you really just want to be able to run, and so it's translating into a behavior that is not helpful. And so this type of therapy really helps you name those thoughts, and then try to dig a little deeper and figure out, like, how are they trying to help you, and then how can we work with them to change that narrative and change the behavioral outcome. And I've just thought for a long time that would be something, because it's a type of therapy that's kind of exploding in the mental health community, and I've just thought for so long that I've thought about going back to school because I'm so interested, and if I did, this would be what it's for.
I have to tell you, I love it, because
so
there's other ones that I've like read or you've told me about or other people tell me about, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. This is like some sort of analogy that it's making really hits home and makes me feel
it's very
like it's
changed my life, honestly. And it goes a lot with like some of the stuff they're talking about with somatic healing, which is that is also another concept that's exploding in the therapy world right now. And that just means that like your body remembers stuff. And so doing this type of like where you're helping identify the thought and like figuring out what it is, and there's a lot of listening that's involved in like listening to yourself and listening what's going on in your head. But what's also really interesting is that these things will show up in your body, and learning how. So there's a great book that's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about how your body remembers. And this nervous system class that I took is about like, because I don't have a lot of memory of growing up. It's kind of like a blank slate. And so it's been very hard in some of the stuff I've needed to do in therapy, because they're like, well, can we talk about this? And I'm like, I don't remember. But the idea with how your body remembers, and the reason that is the case is because your nervous system remembers. And so you were born with a blank slate, and it's this idea that like your nervous system is really developed and shaped by the experiences that you have like growing up and in the household you grow up in, and that the reason that your body remembers stuff is because your nervous system, from an evolutionary perspective, is intended to keep you safe. And so your nervous system is scanning at all times. And that's what's shaping your nervous system. It's like, is this safe? Is this not safe? Who is safe? And so because of that, your nervous system is then developed through your experiences. And that's why it remembers, right? So it's your nervous system that is connecting your brain and the experiences you're taking in like through like your sensory perceptions in your head and your body. And it's connecting those two things. And that is why your body does remember things. And that is why there's this just huge explosion around doing therapy and things with what they call somatic healing, which is the idea that you're kind of listening for like where something shows up in your body. and that sounds so hokey, but the reason that
It's
happens,
not hokey, and we deal with it in physical therapy all the time.
Well,
because many of the pain syndromes and things that we have
do.
going on are very much, it's not in your head, like made up in your head.
No.
It's the connection between that nervous
Yes.
system and the brain, and it's where you're storing it.
well, and the thing is that, again, because I'm very heady, like and I'm just like, what the shit? It's in my body. Like, that's some shit. That's some bullshit. Like, it's in my body, and I, like, and so it's really the reason all this nervous system stuff has been helpful for me is because it helps me understand, like, how and why that's happening. And then I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so I can then, work with that. And so my point is that this internal family systems, you're also, it's an exercise in listening, because you're also listening for, like, where you feel it in your body, which is very significant, because it's like it actually is stored there. And so it's a different way to get to the information and kind of understand it, and then work with it in a way that, like, a lot of traditional therapies haven't done. And it's amazing. I'm so fascinated by it. But my point in this really is that I've thought for a long time this would be so helpful to use in the sports psychology realm. And as the universe, like, it sometimes hits me in the face, and I had this gentleman contact me who has recently become certified to become a triathlon coach. He's been a triathlete for a long time, and unbelievably, he works in IFS, and he's done it for, like, decades, which is, it's not like he just got certified in the past 5 years. It's like he's done it way before it was cool. And he happens to also be, like, he's just doing some work that I think is amazing. Anyway, he contacted me to do some coaching mentoring with him. And we started talking about, the fact that he uses this, and he's also interested in sports psychology. And so I have set up a clinic for him with my athletes, is the point of this. So I'm really, really excited to bring him in. We're doing a clinic in August, and we can't do it like a whole team thing. So it's a limited space thing, because, you're working with stuff that's pretty delicate, and you need to just really have the space to do it.
If it goes well, you might be able to hold it a couple more times to get everybody an opportunity for it.
I'm just so excited.
I am so excited. I hope I can be one of those athletes, if not this time round, if the person comes back. But I was thinking about an example, and I've told this story before about getting in the water. I kind of want to name the committee member, if we can.
I would love it.
So there was that in my race, and I think I've told this story before. I'll make it really fast. It was like the way the course was lined up for the swim.
On your 70.3.
On my 70.3. It was one big, huge circle, and I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah.
And so when I jumped in, I did this thing where I just was like, turning around and face the shore, face the course, face the shore, face the course. And I was going through this mental battle of, and I think you would say it was my protector telling me this might not be safe. You might drown. You might die. Yeah. But then, and you asked me how did you decide to, because I ended up doing the race. Like, how did you decide not to get out of the water? Mm-hmm. And it was another committee member, I guess it would be, that was saying, no, you are trained for this. Mm-hmm. Trust your training. You can do this. Right. Don't give up. What are the consequences? You will be really unhappy with yourself if you get out and you don't try this.
Well, and I think that is an excellent example of how the narrative in your head translates to behaviors.
Okay.
Right? And so what you are saying in your head and the dialogue that you are dialing into is really, like, if you had listened to, all of the things saying that you can't do it, you very well may not have done it, but you change that dialogue, and you're changing, you change the behaviors because you did it and you did great.
And this goes back to that same thing we always are harping on, practice, which is you practiced it in training. And that was what allowed me to say, look, you survived this in practice. This is the same distance that you've been practicing. It just looks different.
Well, and that is using the behavior to change the narrative in your head, right? And so that's something, they talk about a lot in the recovery community. You can't think your way into right acting. You have to act your way into right thinking. And that's where you practice that, right? So we did have you practice that in training, because you were then able to change the narrative around your behavior, because you had taught yourself to trust that you could do it, right? And so you earn that in training, and that's where you use your behavior to change the narrative, and that is why it matters so much, both what you're doing in training, but also what your internal narrative is and what you're telling yourself in training, right? Because you also have to practice changing. And in that book we read that was called The Brave Athlete, they talked about how that's called changing the channel. And so it's like a radio, like you can have, you have to, and it is a practice, and it is a choice, and it is intentional. It does not just happen, and it is never easy. And so, in anything you're doing, and that's what I think that sort of gets like lost in the conversation, or maybe hasn't really been brought up intentionally and specific enough yet, is that when I tell my athletes that the internal dialogue that you are practicing is a choice, and you're practicing it just like you practice the physical training, because unless you strengthen that muscle mentally, it is not going to be there for you on race day. And it is a choice.
And you have to practice the different way. We have one of our earliest episodes was about battling the demons in your head.
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways that will work for different people.
Yeah.
And figuring out what works for you is something that you've done throughout training. You've practiced various different ways, because what works for Liz might not work for Amy, might not work for so-and-so. So again, it's not something that you can just show up on race day and be like, oh, I'm going to use this mantra or whatever the and it's method that you're going to use.
It's not right. And it's learning, like, you practice that in practice, because you learn that we don't have the expectation that those thoughts go away or that you're going to feel good. You learn that you can manage those through something, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So you manage that through whatever you're feeling, and that feelings aren't like, feelings don't dictate outcomes. So you might be feeling all of this stuff, but you're learning how to manage your way through it. But it really takes practice, because the feelings feel very real. It feels very much like, you can't do X, Y, or Z, and you can feel that and still be managing your way through it. And we do that all the time with hard stuff in our real life, right? Like you may feel like,
hopefully,
well,
some of us better than others.
Well, yeah.
I think it's easier for me to do it in sports than any other aspect of my life.
Well, and that's because you've got decades of practicing that, right? But I get somebody who's
But I didn't practice it. I haven't practiced it in my real life.
Well, and so but there's an opportunity there. And when you see you can do it in one place, you learn you can do it in another. And that's where I think the power of sports is so amazing. And that is why I think you see, like, I have had athletes who have come to me and said, because, like, this is why I coach, because they say, I know because I did an Ironman, I can do this. And like, because you've learned, it's not about the Ironman, it's about the skills you've learned, how you got through that and did the thing you didn't think you could, and what skills are required to do that. And I'm talking about that way beyond the physical training, what you've learned, and how that's where sports is the agent of change.
Adversity,
right, and how you get through that. And it's just,
but the mental part is
it's all the mental part.
It's such a big thing that we don't always pay attention to. So I like that you're shedding light on it.
I'm very excited.
I love that. I can tell you're very excited. If you're listening to this cast in 2024, well, I think we're releasing this end of May. If you are interested in signing up for that, how do they sign up for that?
It's on my website, and we have 6 slots left. So there's not a lot of slots left. It's August 10th, which is a Saturday. And so we have 6 slots. We've got a really amazing location for it. I'm so excited. I just announced it last week, and we had some slots get taken, so there's still a few. And I'm super excited.
As of today, which is the 10th of May. So, but if there's enough interest, if people email you and say, oh my gosh, and you've got this wait listed people, they could be on a wait list and then also do it again. Awesome.
Thanks so much for listening. And remember,
we are in this together. Until next time.